Okay, we're ready whenever.
Crazy.
Have we had press training?
All right, guys.
Now we're actually mic'd
Whoa,
up.
we're
A lot
we're
of people
on.
over here.
Live wire. Here we go.
You guys want to sit?
Hello, hello.
Don't rush the stage,
Hello.
please.
Everybody
Yeah, I
talk?
agree. I don't like Donovan either.
Oh, yeah.
Yo!
Woo! Everybody talk. Okay, everybody good? We're good to go?
Just kidding.
I know.
All right. Welcome to the developer panel at Connect 2016. Very excited to have you all here. We're going to have a Q&A with some wonderful people. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I would like you guys to say what are you really excited about that we announced this morning, and then we'll open it up for any questions from you guys. Is that cool? All right. Donovan, why don't you give a start?
My name's Donovan Brown. I'm a senior DevOps program manager here at Microsoft. I'm responsible for the DevOps vision on top of Team Foundation Server and on top of Visual Studio Team Services. Clearly, I'm excited about what we did with Docker today. I mean, it was amazing to be able to just right-click and all your worries go away when it comes to Docker. So really exciting.
That was a really great demo.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
It was fun. Corey?
Great. So my name is Corey Sanders. I'm in charge of the compute team in Azure. So I'm responsible for virtual machines, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service offerings as well. I actually was really excited about the Linux Foundation announcement. I think that's something that has been pretty, it's been fantastic to continue to work in that community, and especially sort of at the lowest layers with support in our virtual machines and sort of up and down the stack for Linux and open source products. And I think it's just a great sort of culmination of a lot of that work coming together to join the Linux Foundation. I think that was pretty exciting. And I'm excited to be up here on stage with so many illustrious people. I'm a little bit disappointed that Donovan didn't bring more audience. I only signed up for this because I heard Donovan.
No, they're lined up for selfies right now. So.
Okay, they're on their way. They're on their way.
Cool.
Scott?
I'm Scott Hanselman, and I manage .NET Community and ASP.NET Community. And Martin Woodward, who's the president of the .NET Foundation, works for me. So .NET Foundation is cool.
Awesome.
And what am I excited about? I'm excited about .NET being really everywhere. You know what I mean? Like from watches and 64K to 64 gigs and terabytes and petabytes and beyond.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
Oh, my name is Julia Lewson. I'm the corporate vice president for Visual Studio and .NET. I am excited about just everything today. If I actually name a favorite, I think my team will be really mad at me because they work on just about everything that was demoed today.
All your children are equally loved.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Cannot pick favorites.
Miguel?
And I'm Miguel de Casa, and I run the Android and iOS team. So we bring .NET to Android and iOS, and tools related to that. And as a side effect of this, Visual Studio for Mac came alive.
What are you excited about? Because you're a really excited guy.
Well, it was, I think, in Julia's boat. I really liked everything. I would say what was interesting to me last night is just how people were so excited about the leaks and people getting excited about finding out what Microsoft is up to. And I remember a few years ago, I was like, hey, Microsoft is like, yeah, are you going to watch? No.
So you're excited that people were excited about the leaks?
Well, I think,
And if we leaked and they weren't excited, that would be bad.
Then you've been
you
upset.
got me entirely wrong.
I did hear that.
I liked everything that we said today. That's why I said, well, Julia got it. But I was very interested last night to see how much excitement there were about all these little leaks that were coming out. I was like, oh, you're running our announcements. But on the other hand, people were excited.
I thought the same
right?
thing.
Instead of being like,
Yeah, who cares?
I got to take care of my cat.
Could have been both, but yeah.
I thought you would say
Cats were hurt.
that.
That's what I'm saying.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys have questions, there are two beautiful women standing around here with microphones. So you just flag them down and whoop. Is any questions? Go to one of them. Okay? All right, so no questions. I can just start asking questions. Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Go for it.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So this is going to be geared towards the efforts in Xamarin. I am really excited about the previewer and inspector and things like that. Can you explain or elaborate on anything you may be doing at the API level, features you may be adding to the framework, such as render, caching, things like that to improve performance, or any new APIs to the platform itself for Xamarin?
So it's a little bit of a trick question, but there's two layers, right? At one level, at the Android and iOS level, everything that we do is we project the native APIs into C#. So there's really not more caching, because the moment that you introduce an extra layer, then we're no longer a one-to-one mapping. So let's leave that aside. So you can do whatever you want with the native APIs. Then there is Xamarin Forms, and that is a high-level API for a class of apps. It's not intended for everybody. It's intended for a series of apps, line of business apps, that sort of thing, or even the bike app that we showed here. And in those scenarios, we are doing a lot of very interesting optimizations that are landing. Essentially, in the past, we used to have a very bare bones one-to-one mapping. If you had a button, well, we would have a UI button. If you have a scroll bar, well, we would have a scroll bar. And inside the scroll bar, we would put this other thing. And we're doing now things where we can actually collapse the hierarchy. So we eliminate superfluous controls that are no longer needed. So there's a lot of work that is going along those lines. And another thing that we've done is we've poked a hole in the system so that it's a lot easier. And I don't know if people noticed because it was very quick and I didn't see a reaction today. But in your Forms XAML description, you can just now poke a hole there and just directly call Android or iOS with a special hook. And you say, when running on Android, put this thing. And if it's iOS, put this thing, right? So you can now embed native controls in XAML and just, so it's another tool for your tool chain.
Cool. Question? All right, Ness, go for it. Mike?
We want to get you on.
Yeah, get you recorded.
We can also repeat them.
Have you guys tried to move a legacy app over to a Docker container? So, for example, like Team Foundation Server?
You're asking if we've tried to move a legacy app, and you described a large app.
Correct.
Legacy or because we showed SQL Server today, right?
You're right. A large app. Specifically, I'm interested in like what are the challenges that we can face as our developers right-click on everything and say, publish to container.
So, I've got a perspective, but Donovan probably knows more about that.
Right. So what we showed today is a quick way to get started with your Docker. So to actually start doing microservices, it's a re-architecture of what you have today. You don't lift and shift a monolithic application and then expect it to scale now that you put it inside of a container. You have to re-architect. The same thing when you go to app services for websites, right? When you go completely PaaS, it's not just lift and shift. It's rethink the way that you're going to deploy your app so that you can actually take advantage of that platform. So I can tell you that VSTS, we're extremely excited about Windows containers because we are going to start adopting those so that we can give you features faster and we can scale more. And that will allow us to scale one part of our application without having to scale the entire thing. Because maybe we need to do a lot more with work item tracking. We don't need to scale our tagging. And now that it's monolithic, you scale one, you got to scale them all, and you're wasting all those resources. So we even have to re-architect the way that we're doing VSTS, because you gave TFS as an example. We don't just lift and shift it into a container, We have to re-architect it to take advantage of that new infrastructure.
Well, that's a microservices architecture, right? You can
Absolutely.
still containerize an application.
You
though,
can,
right?
but most people containerize it because they're wanting to be able to scale it. They're wanting to be able to, and your app has to understand that there's going to be multiple copies of me running. It's not just the same app lifted and shifted.
I'll layer. You want to go?
If you don't mind, because there's a couple.
I do.
You do mind?
No, I'm just kidding. You can
You
go.
mind?
Yeah, I know.
There's a couple of interesting dimensions to that. So to his point, if you want to get all the benefits of scale, scale out, containers, microservices, absolutely re-architect. If you go and have an app that runs on bare metal and you stick it in a VM, that's a step, and you go, hey, cool, I put it in a VM, and I've solved a problem, but not the entire class of problems, to Donovan's point.
Sure.
Now I could go and take that and run it in a container. I've moved another direction. I've solved a slightly different problem. Let's say that I'm a Windows 10 Surface Book user. I've got a pro version of Windows 10. But ultimately, I deploy my application on Windows Server 2016. I'm running on IIS Express, on Visual Studio. It is an extremely close to what production looks like, but it is, in fact, not what production looks like, right?
Sure.
It's not reality. I'm on IIS Express. I'm on Windows 10 Pro. So then I might go and run Windows Server 2016 in a container, and then not use IIS Express, use proper IIS. So there's a benefit there that a regular person, a regular human on commodity hardware can really run Windows Server 2016 and real IIS in a perfectly matching reality.
Yeah.
Again, VMs, containers, container running 2016. Ultimately, though, I'm limited to scaling up, to Donovan's point.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's really about containers help you build an immutable image That is the key, and then that's only one benefit. And then you truly get the benefit of microservice and containers, you have to go componentize. So you can scale out just the portion that requires scaling out, instead of the entire unit by itself.
Absolutely.
Right.
So those are the sort of two
Yeah.
goalposts.
And I think when we see sort of at the lowest layer, the VM side, I mean, we actually see a bunch of customers who deploy sort of one-to-one, one container on a VM. And I think it comes back to sort of the same point. You know, when we see the value of containers, I typically think of it in sort of three different aspects. One, deployment ease, which I think is what we've been talking about, right? Where you can have a one-to-one mapping, one container on one VM, and you get that deployment ease. You can take advantage of tooling, common tooling like VSTS, and get that right at the VM level. Then there's deployment ease plus density. Right? You can actually take advantage now more of a virtual machine. It takes some rewriting, some rethinking, but you can also get some lift and shift there as well. And this is where you sort of look at our container services as offering that ability to orchestrate across a set of smaller VMs and take advantage of it. And then isolation sort of at the top, where now you get your microservices architecture, where basically every single one is its own independent object, and they all have very fully formed APIs between them. And I think when you add all three of those up, then you're fully rewriting, absolutely, at the top layer.
And it might seem like everyone here feels strongly about this, and everyone here is trying to parse that down. This is important. The promise of containers doesn't fit into a tweet. This is complicated.
And I'm going to tweet that, by the way.
This is complicated. It's multidimensional. You have to use words like immutable that explain exactly what's going on in the reality of it. So not in any way to trivialize what you're saying, but it's like you have a great question, and it's like, well, let's teach a 40-hour class on containers and the promise of it from multiple dimensions.
I see some work coming up.
Immutable is less than 140 characters.
I think
though.
I
You
just-
could fit that.
You say like I-14.
I
Yeah.
dash, something like that.
I think I just got assigned work, though.
Yeah.
Cool.
So hopefully we answered, since it was about 20 minutes of
Yeah.
all of us.
Does that feel good?
So it sounds like you can make a phased migration approach too.
Totally.
Oh, absolutely.
So cool. All right, we have a question in the back over there.
So with this whole shift to microservices and containerization, you can see that you're really into containers. How does the service, Azure Container Service, relate to Azure Service Fabric, for instance?
I guess that's mine, huh?
Yeah, I'm not
Both those
touching that.
services are in my team. Yeah, so really great question. So one of the things we've done with Azure Container Service that I think is really cool is all of the services in Azure Container Service are fully open source services. And that's sort of one of the principles we sort of held to with the container service, that we want to make sure that they're fully open source and fully portable. And so with all of them, they end up being different reasons why people are using those different container services in the market. A lot of people like Docker Swarm, a lot of people like DCOS and Kubernetes, which we just recently added. And for different workloads, DCOS, picked up a lot of Spark excitement and so on. And so I think the goal with each one of those is to offer diversity, right? It's basically, look, we want to make it really easy to deploy and manage the infrastructure underneath it. But the infrastructure is going to continue to be there because the whole point is that they're portable, right? You can go and deploy them somewhere else if you want to. You can deploy them back on-prem if you want to. And so that's sort of one of the strategies there. Service Fabric is actually a very similar category as those other three. It's not fully open source, but it is fully portable, right? And so in some regards, Service Fabric solves some different aspects, right? It's got more focus on the microservice application model. But in some ways, across the four of them, you've basically got this level of diversity where you can deploy different container solutions based on your interests and sort of the way in which you want to interact. So Service Fabric's particularly strong in the application model aspect. Like I said, DCOS is particularly strong in Spark and so on. And so you can sort of map out how people are liking them. But they end up basically creating a continuum of diversity that offers portable solutions with basically a managed infrastructure underneath. And that's sort of the overall strategy there. Did I answer your question? More or less? Yeah.
So how does Azure Functions fit right into this?
The shocking part about that is the spectrum of choice
Yeah.
that is available, as
Yes.
opposed to what you could have said was prescriptively, we think you should use that.
Right.
And that's cool.
I didn't say that.
You did not say that.
That's right.
Nicely done.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. That's great. We're just going to continue, so please put your hands down.
Continue praising Corey.
This actually was the best part of the day. So tell me more about what I've done well. Sorry.
So we have another question here.
About Service Fabric.
Yeah.
I just started to learn it, try to understand what are internals, and you have name resolution services, application services. So the question is, could you integrate some kind of third-party repository, let's say JFrog or Nexus, to store artifacts and consume them from Service Fabric? And another aspect of with that metadata you need to provide within Visual Studio solution, how to instantiate and where starting point, could some of that information would be derived from type of application, how it's stored? Let's say if it's Docker kind of package, you don't need to all of this kind of metadata. You just bring it, and Docker file will tell you how to instantiate and run. This would make much more simpler development and understanding.
Yeah.
Paraphrase.
Yeah. Yeah, let me repeat back and make sure I got your question. So I think maybe I'll start at the end and kind of work backwards. I think the end part of your question was, we require as part of Service Fabric a bunch of metadata that you have to sort of draft up of sort of what your app looks like and so on, sort of the model aspect, the declarative form. And your question was, gosh, it'd be great if we could just take advantage of Docker there and sort of not have that level of metadata requirement.
Not just Docker. My personal opinion, you need to deploy application to the binary repository, and in the invocation from Service Fabric should be some kind of pointer or maybe metadata, like you said, which points to the external repository, bring it to runtime, and just make use of it.
Totally. Well, so let me address, I think, and then if I didn't get it, maybe we can talk afterwards as well. I think one of the benefits that Service Fabric brings, and kind of getting back even to the question before, is that it does take a somewhat prescriptive approach to how to think and write microservices, right? It offers both the reliable services side and then the actor side. And the actor side is pretty cool because it effectively allows you to think sort of microservices as an object-oriented type of style. And part of that is the modeling aspect of Service Fabric that keeps track of the versioning. And so one of the things that is particularly hard with microservices, regardless of sort of which platform you use, is making updates. This is, of course, hard no matter what your application is, but once you turn a 3-tier app into a 20 different instances of microservices, trying to update one and keep track of them all is very, very challenging. And this is some of what that prescriptive aspect of the platform is all about. It's about modeling and then mapping and tracking the different versions between the different microservices, and making sure that as versions are rolled out, because it does do sort of a rolling upgrade perspective, that version is very strict, right? So sort of old versions of other services, when they're accessing it, they're not getting the wrong version. They're not sort of in this middle state. Now, you actually can use Service Fabric as just an orchestrator. You actually can treat it that way. You can basically ignore a lot of those versioning rules and just deploy containers with it. It is something that we've talked about, and we're actually looking at how do we improve that even more so. But it sort of takes away all that prescriptive aspect and kind of puts, again, back the onus on you to go figure out how you're going to map all those different services together. And so, it's one of the both, I like to talk about it for Service Fabric, one of both biggest strengths is also, in some ways, its weakness, which is the prescriptive nature of it, right? It's trying to help you build and manage your microservices, but in some ways, it's not as easy to sort of pull out pieces and replace them with other pieces simply because it's trying to sort of help you in that prescriptive way. So I don't know if that answered your question. It didn't.
Not at all.
Maybe we should take it. Why don't I grab you afterwards? Maybe I misunderstood.
Pretty technical. It's pretty.
Why don't I follow up with you afterwards and we can talk more
we'll
about
follow
it.
up.
Pretty technical.
Yeah.
They have completely different questions.
Oh,
Want to try a
okay.
different question?
What do you think about Docker Engine 1.12 with Docker Swarm mode?
Yeah, I mean, I think Docker Swarm Mode's great. I don't know if I saw some folks from Docker here actually or today. I think Docker Swarm Mode's great, I think it's gonna simplify a lot of application development, especially on the networking side.
So if you would choose between Next Docker and Service Fabric, what would you choose?
Why do you need to choose?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on. It actually depends on who the developer is and what the scenario is, what the tooling is. There's actually a lot of factors, just like choosing any language, right? I mean, I think at least for me, if someone said, "Hey, just in a vacuum, do you choose .NET or Java, right? I actually would want to have a conversation. Well, tell me a little bit more about what you're doing. Tell me about what the other people around you are doing. Tell me about, what tool chain you're using, right? Like, I think there's a lot of questions that sort of come in, and that's why we have choice. I think if we were really strong that this is the only answer, I don't think we'd have the choice available.
No, the answer is always .NET. I mean,
Sorry, maybe that wasn't a good example in this group.
You don't need to convince me in
From a
that.
container orchestration perspective, it's
Yes.
a nascent community. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. I don't think that it's time to pick a winner. I think that there's the Docker folks, there's people talking about open containers, there's Kubernetes, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. The nice thing about it is none of them really lock you into anything.
That's right.
So, I mean, you have a for loop. You want to scale your for loop out. There's about 50 million ways to do it, and you can orchestrate it. You can do it microservices. You can do it scale up. You can throw hardware at it. You can scale. I mean, it's a very nuanced thing, and what we're trying to do is enable ways for you to do your for loop in a cloud in the way that makes you happy, on the operating system that makes you happy, with the orchestrator that makes you happy.
And the
With
language
the
that
tools
makes
that
you
make you
happy.
happy. That's what you're talking.
Seriously,
that
but like as
dovetails
far as
right into the
pick a
tools
winner,
that
And the language you let
it's
makes
not
you happy.
this,
yeah.
we're past the pick a winner. Which one do you suggest?
That's right.
You can legit do these things in multiple ways.
Yeah.
As long as you use .NET.
Yeah, I forgot the group I was with. I apologize, everyone. I didn't mean to insult anyone. Yeah, all right.
That was pretty low level for this panel.
Yeah, pretty low.
I was feeling that one.
Yeah.
I was disassembling code in my brain.
Hi. One of my favorite demos to watch this morning was James Montemagno's Mobile Center, and thinking about how we could use that for our Xamarin iOS and Android apps and continuous integration, continuous delivery. I was wondering if anyone could go a little deeper on some of the features that went by really fast, and specifically, how does it integrate with Hockey App? What pieces of that are built on top of Hockey App, and what's the future roadmap for Hockey App and Xamarin Insights and Xamarin Test Cloud? And also something around how you could possibly use any of that tooling with an on-premise TFS source control repository.
right. Well, I can definitely answer the first part. And
I can answer the second.
the good news about Mobile Center is that we took a look at many independent technologies that were siloed, right? Hockey App had its users, its logging system, its things. We had VSTS, which was linked to your Microsoft account. We had Xamarin Test Cloud, which was its own universe. And the first thing that we did is we wanted to provide an end-to-end experience to the user, right? So what Nat was saying, at least last night, I don't think he said it today in the keynote, but what Nat was saying last night as he was reviewing the slides is, it's a little bit like when you build your own house, right? Your own cottage, and if you build it by hand, you'll pick a piece of tube for the drain, and maybe the water uses some lead pipes that you found. But it's your house, you build it, you learn how to do it, you assemble from the ground up, it's yours, right? And it's fine, maybe that's I mean, a lot of people are happy with that, but what we're trying to do is essentially give users the option to have the entire pipeline from end to end available for them. And that's what we did. So what the team did, and this is what to me was very interesting, was that the team started by a design. What is the user experience that we want to create? And I think the first few months of the project was just going through mock-ups of what the final user experience is. And then we took the existing backend services and we plugged them in for that particular experience. So you will be happy to know that Mobile Center is a new UI, an integrated UI with a unified REST API across the board. But behind it has the technology that came from Hockey App. So if you have your Hockey App systems, or you have your Hockey App logs, or your applications are instrumented, they'll flow into that UI. Same thing for Test Cloud. And like Nat mentioned today, when you're configuring your builds, we just have a nice UI, but behind the scenes is VSTS. So it's doing all the VSTS, and if you need to go down to the configuration of your build steps, or adding extra build steps, or special signing, or delegation, whatever you need to do, you go into that. So essentially, it's an integrated platform for all of the existing disparate services. And there's a couple of more things like storage and identity and a couple of other things that you can manage from Mobile Center.
And the nice thing is that you don't have to use all of them. You can
Right,
pick and choose
right.
the ones that you actually need for your application. That flexibility is integrated experience, but very flexible in terms of which one you pick and choose. I think that is also super important
Yeah.
design point.
So if you want to just replace the roof of your cottage, we'll replace the roof of your cottage with a Tesla certified cell. But if you want to keep using what you had, you can also do it. So it's the same stuff behind the scenes. It's been upgraded. It's been scaled. Like, for example, we had some pieces that had never been scaled up, and they were still using a single instance database server. It was Hockey App used and was an old technology that we acquired, and now we scale it up. It's uses Azure. You use DocumentDB. All of these things that we produce. So we get a lot of benefits by reworking some of the internals.
And Donovan, I
And
think
the
you
second
can
question,
probably-
yeah, was internal TFS.
How
does that work?
We actually have the ability for you to build inside of Visual Studio Team Services from any source. So you can actually take an external, your on-premise TFS source control and pull it into the cloud if we needed to take advantage of some of the assets that we have in VSTS. We've been doing that for quite some time because Visual Studio Team Services is updated every 3 weeks, and then on-prem we only update it every 3 months. So those who want to have their source on-prem for whatever reason but don't want to wait for those features, we've been able to have that conduit for you to get to your source and start utilizing the features that we have in the cloud. So we can absolutely do that for you.
Cool.
May I ask you, right now I'm evaluating VSTS, and it's impressive. And the integration with security service, Azure Active Directory, is great. The only question I could not answer is DLP policy, right? So the scenario my security guy is giving me, so I have a offshore person who check out code on local computer, does something, and I didn't get an answer if that person is no more with my company, how to invalidate those assets, including code, at his local computer.
Someone
Can
has
you replicate
downloaded
access?
code
Yeah.
onto their machine and you want to nuke it from orbit.
Right.
Right. Once, yeah,
You want
once,
to revoke, you can revoke access.
Yes.
You can't revoke a Git clone or
Correct.
a TFS Git.
Yeah, but those assets which left on his computer should
Right.
somehow.
Right.
So my perspective, you tell me what you think, but if your machine's MDM or Intune enabled, you nuke it from orbit, and
Right.
you just torch the machine. You don't
Correct.
torch the assets specifically at a source
correct.
level.
A lot of people try to do that, but I mean, you'd have to disable thumb drives. You'd have to disable, once the software is on my machine, I have access to that code unless you can physically get that machine back, because you don't know if I copied it to a thumb drive. There's so many other ways I could get those files off of there.
So there
But
are
his
no
rights, you can revoke instantly. It's just
So there are no DLP kind of scenario when you encrypt it in
I don't know that acronym you're saying. DLP?
Data
No,
Data leakage
no, actually,
protection?
no. Actually, the enterprise that I have worked with, when they want to have that level of stringent security requirement, they tend to have all of they don't basically work in the terminal.
You can't
Everything
clone
is, all of the workstations
That
in
I
the cloud.
understand. That I understand. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually the
And
other
if
side.
you're going to do that,
Previously, you have some kind of remote desktop services which are obsolete now, right?
Well, no, actually, in Azure today, we have an Azure Dev Test Lab solution, and actually, it's a pretty good way to go provision desktops and give. We have benchmarked the solutions that are very equivalent to what you developer, like the Microsoft developer actually gets on-prem, and it's a pretty reasonable way to work.
So they working through remote desktop with those.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, you can spin up some
Okay.
amazing. I almost dev exclusively out of Azure. So all of my Visual Studios that I run are in VMs in Azure.
Yeah.
Because I can get the latest bits much quicker than I want to have to install them myself. And when I'm done, I turn them down, and I can spin up some really big machines, bigger than my laptop, run RDP into them. I have a much better development
And then with
great
the Dev Test
visualization
Lab,
GPUs.
Yes,
yeah.
fantastic.
And then with the Dev Test Lab services that we have in Azure, you can also provision a bunch of policies to let you say, when do you want to have the machine turn off? You can watch the spin, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Got a question back here?
Oh, yes. How you doing?
Good.
When developers are using Xamarin, what's their primary, are they using Windows, are they using Mac? And a follow-up question is, what's the roadmap for extensibility in your VS Mac version?
I have anecdotal data. I'm sorry. I know that we captured the analytics, but I don't know off the top of my head. I might be wrong, but I think about a third of our users, I believe, Joseph is there. I think about a third of our users are on Mac and 2/3 are on Windows. No? Did I get it? All right. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, and it's anecdotal. In the office, we use 50-50. So let's go with the office. With a sample of 30 people, 50-50, people developing Macs, people developing Windows. I would say, historically, it's, in my opinion, when you build iOS apps, it's useful to be on a Mac so you can immerse yourself into the Kool-Aid, right? And I think it's very important. I was a Linux user, and once you start using the Mac, you start to see the way that Apple sees things, and the way that there's a little bit of a spirit, a little bit of a community thing going with the Mac, a little bit of it's a subtle joke going on, and there's a subtle humor in that community, and you're only gonna get it if you use a Mac.
Well, that's why
Like the escape keys?
The what?
Like the escape keys?
But it's like the Office on the
Wow.
Microsoft, the
Dig.
Office on the Mac team is all together. They all run Mac. They do everything on a Mac because the design language, the feel, the vibe.
Yes, yeah.
And the Linux folks, you've got a whole bunch of Linux people, and there's like a cabal of the Linux folks in compute, and they work and they live in that world, and they immerse themselves in it so that their apps are effective. That's right.
So
Good
my
use of it.
recommendation is that if you want to build a great iOS app, that you should, have your developers learn the idioms. Now, that said, we have folks like James Montemagno that will not touch a Mac unless forced to. And so is Michaela Hutchinson, my PM on the platform. She will not touch a Mac unless she's forced to. And they build great apps anyway. So we're making it possible for you to do it in both. I think it's worthwhile to immerse yourself in the Apple way of thinking. And if you're building Android apps, honestly, I really recommend you digest and make the material design guidelines your Bible, because you gotta structure your apps in a different way to look like Android apps.
And how about the follow-up question? What's the roadmap on extensibility in Visual Studio on the Mac?
Uh,
Other toolings and UI components and design time experiences.
We do not have a published roadmap, but I can tell you that it is already extensible. In fact, Visual Studio for the Mac there's a core that is shared with MonoDevelop and Xamarin Studio. That core is shared, but everything, ASP.NET Core Debugging, .NET Core Debugging, Android, iOS, the designers, every single one of those are extensions. JavaScript, TypeScript, all of those were extensions. So it's very extensible. It's actually very well documented. And I'll be happy to walk you through some specifics. Now, it is a different API. It's not the same API because they came from two different lineages. So, I mean, eventually they'll converge because we're sharing a lot of code with Visual Studio. And so for those pieces, you'll see the APIs eventually converge.
Yeah, actually, all the extensions just mentioned, TypeScript,
Yes.
Roslyn, and then the HTML editors,
Yes.
and ASP.NET Core, all of those things are actually shared code between
Yep.
Visual Studio on Windows and Visual Studio on Mac.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're doing an extension that deals with C#, the other day somebody was saying, I want an extension that when it saves, it removes all the unused statements. It's like, all right, sure. What is the API? It's Roslyn. Oh, it's the same one I have. Yes. All you got to do is change the hook, and your extension runs unsaved.
To Julia's point, when I found out how much code was shared, particularly around the editors, I just assumed that it was like, oh, you just had to write the whole thing over again? Like, no, at all.
And I have to say, this was actually a beautiful realization, because we, as engineers, we like to talk about, we're going to design the perfect model view controller, but the reality is ugly. The reality is it's a hodgepodge of hacks. And when we looked at Visual Studio, we said, well, we would like...
Not the reality.
Yeah, it is not.
Platform is not a hodgepodge.
No, not at all.
Speak for
VSTS
yourself,
is solid
Redesigned this
architecture
thing
and design.
And that's when the panel went to hell.
Exactly.
We're out of here.
Let me rephrase.
Take off his mic. Everyone take off his mic.
Can we kill his mic, please?
Yeah, please. Yes, exactly.
When you look at my GitHub repo, it's
Yes.
a hodgepodge of hacks. But when we looked at Visual Studio, and we're thinking, all right, how are we going to do this? Because Scott Guthrie said, you guys got to figure out a way of sharing code. So like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. So, all right, let's check out the code. Turns out that the entire Visual Studio editor, this is a thing of beauty. It's a thing of beauty.
How did you get from Hodgepodge of Hacks to Thing of Beauty?
Scott
He was
told you.
talking about his code,
Scott told you.
not from Visual Studio.
Scott said, you guys
Scott
gotta
said,
check code.
"Fix this."
I'm just saying,
Keep going.
my
He was on a
experience in
roll.
the industry is that hacks had to be done. You know, some.
But the Visual Studio Editor
Next
was a piece
question.
of beauty.
So the Visual Studio Editor is a thing of beauty because it's actually the entire editing engine, undo, history, background processing, buffers, everything. It's in a unit that has no external dependencies. It doesn't talk to WPF.
It's not
doesn't
UI
talk to
specific.
COM.
That's-
Yeah.
that's
Doesn't
the
have
part.
a single bit of. I mean, this is incredible because.
Barry told me that.
I mean, you got to understand that the level of I don't want to say pedantic. No, the.
Componentization that we have done.
Yeah, the architect, you gotta say it's worth to invest in a clean design because I'm gonna use it in the future. And I'm thinking, if I was building the text, like, this is not gonna run anywhere else but Windows, right? But the reality is that it was very well architected. It was perfectly architected. So taking it, it's essentially, I mean, it's a drop-in replacement. Now, we haven't done the drop-in yet, but it's coming in stages for numerous reasons. We don't, right, anyways. But it's not as pretty as you guys.
You guys are talking.
So,
Yes.
but it is incredibly well done. So a lot of that code is just dropped in because it was very well done. I mean, I guess people.
Please, no.
No.
I want to see how deep
Does
this goes.
does that mean then future targets of capability and functionality for both VS Windows, VS Mac will go to market at the same time, possibly in the future?
Hopefully, a lot of things should
Is that
be.
a strategy? I mean,
Now,
is that a strategy?
Well, and actually, hold on. Look, I think that like it's not critical that everything in Visual Studio, Windows, and Mac have to go to market at the same time. We'll make a lot of capability go to market,
Right.
when it makes sense. But there's also going to be different innovations that come at maybe slightly different speed. I'm just saying that it doesn't have to. And also, if you look at the release cadences of Visual Studio on Windows, it's released constantly. So, think about the cadences of VSTS and TFS. It's based on the same code base. And then, in the cloud, we're releasing every 3 weeks, and on-prem, it's every 3 months. So we'll have some slight differences, but they will be coming to market very rapidly, is really the key takeaway.
So let me wrap it up because I know that I made a mess out of this cake. So, 2 things to keep in mind. One, the Visual Studio code base is incredibly well done, tested, robust. It's amazing. It is a thing of beauty. Second, we like Julia was saying, we're not going to bring everything because there are things that just don't make sense. And our focus right now is to make 2 classes of developers incredibly happy. .NET Core developers on Mac, because we want them to go to Linux and Mac and deploy to the cloud, and mobile developers. So that is our focus, and we're going to make sure that we execute, and we're going to deliver a perfect experience 100%. Now, there are shared pieces of code, like, for example, Roslyn. Roslyn will come out with a new language feature, and that is the kind of thing that you can expect will come in at the same cadence. So new language features, we'll give you the new language features, that sort of thing. But if Visual Studio adds new capabilities for UWP development, we're not doing UWP development on the Mac.
But this is,
Right.
is common sense, right? It's Visual Studio for the Mac. You're not going to see WinForms.
Right.
You know,
I just
you're
wanted
gonna
to,
see- you're gonna see a
I just wanted
nice-
to clean up my mess
Yeah, I know.
that I made.
And we can do it very simply, maybe even tweet-sized.
I'm counting characters.
I'll work on that.
Great web experience, great microservice experience, web APIs, Razor, ASP.NET, mobile heads for those back-end services. That's where.
Yeah.
That's
That's
where
a sweet
Visual
spot,
Mac goes.
and we're gonna nail that puppy to the wall. I mean, we're gonna.
Next question.
I know you like cats, but still.
I know you mean well. I know you
You
mean
were
well.
almost there.
He was that close. He was that close, and he kept talking.
We actually do have another question over
Okay,
here.
oh, yeah,
first.
oh, yeah.
Okay, that's.
All right. Can you talk about the future of Team Foundation Server and how it relates to Git? When companies should choose one over the other? And then secondly, will Team Foundation Server be integrated into Visual Studio for the Mac?
Okay, I'll take the first one. So Team Foundation Server is still going to have a very long life, right? We have no plans to get rid of it. There's people who
You're
want to
talking about the source code part of it?
No, well, I'm talking about
Server.
let's talk. That's a good question.
Like, if
So-
you wouldn't mind parsing, because I was
Absolutely.
confused with there's VSTS, there's TFS.
Absolutely.
ES,
So
TFS.
Team Foundation Server and Visual Studio Team Services are essentially twins. One you install yourself, one we host for you in the cloud.
Okay.
All right. Their goal is the same. There's reasons you might want to have it on-prem because that's your intellectual property. It's your source control, and people feel safe having it close to where they are. Now, because of what we just described, we can update one every 3 weeks because it's in the cloud. It's very easy for us to do, and one every 3 months on-prem. So that's one of the differences. But we have no intentions of getting rid of what's on-prem. So the future is great. We already support Git inside of the on-prem product. We also support TFVC, which is a centralized version control. What's nice is that you don't have to choose. Pick whichever one makes you feel good. We support them both. I tell people, don't go to Git just because it's trendy. Go to Git because it solves a problem for you. And if you need it, we have it. If you're okay with centralized version control, and we were for decades, then stay with centralized version control, because we're going to continue to support that for you as well. So as far as it being integrated into what's in Visual Studio on the Mac, I'll let someone else field that one.
Well, it's valuable feedback, and I'll tell you right now that we've heard it before. It is on our to-do list to investigate what is it going to take to make it happen, but I don't have a timeline to share right now. Now, our users are very vocal, so you can expect that will bubble up as something that we need to look very seriously at soon.
You still have access to both TFS and Visual Studio Team Services on your Mac today, even without it being integrated inside of that tool set. So please don't think that until we do that, you don't have access to those assets, right? I am a big proponent of any language, any platform for Visual Studio Team Services and Team Foundation Server. We could not care less what language you're versioning. We do not care less what you're building or where you want to build it. And that's been true for quite some time now. So yes, you might have to do your Git from a command line or use some other GUI of your choice, but you can still do your development and use Team Foundation Server and Visual Studio Team Services for all your development on a Mac today.
Cool. I think we have another question over here.
Yeah, so I have a little source of confusion around .NET Core and .NET Standard. I was hoping you can kind of clarify the story there, if they're the same thing, if they're not the same thing, if they're what goals each are trying to solve. I'm just a little confused on where one fits and where the other does.
Sure. I will try to do it without hurting any animals. Tell me if I get this right. Okay.
It will be right.
All right. So the .NET Framework, we know the .NET Framework, that runs on Windows, and you can tell it runs on Windows because it's in C, Windows, Microsoft.NET. That's where it's always been. And typically, you get that either by installing it on Windows or you get a new Windows, right? You got a new .NET when you got Windows 10, okay? .NET Core is installed either at the user mode or is a framework that is cross-platform, that is installed on an application basis, self-contained. I can go make a .NET Core app, put it on a USB key, say I want it to work on Ubuntu, and I can give it to Corey and he could plug it in and it will work. That is self-contained, compact. It is the core or the essence of what made .NET great for so long. Now, let's talk about it in the context of Android, because this is a good example. We've got lots of Android phones, let's say, in this room, and there's like 4.2.3, and the Nexus at this size, and the 3.4.5, and all these different flavors, Kit Kat and ice cream and all that kind of stuff, right? When an Android developer decides I want to support something, they don't say I want to support Kit Kat and ice cream and this and that. They say I'm going to support API level 14 or 15. And as they increase their API surface area, they exclude older handsets as they go towards newer models. The .NET Standard is an API surface level where the lower numbers have very broad support but fewer APIs. So if I use .NET Standard 1, it'll work basically everywhere on everything. It works on Windows 7, it works on 8, Android, everywhere. .NET Standard 1.6 is slightly more exclusionary in the number of things it supports because it supports newer stuff, because it has more APIs. What we're trying to do is come up with an API surface level that you can point at that then abstracts away. It works on .NET 4.5.2 and .NET Core 1.1 and Mono and Xamarin and whatnot. So you write to the .NET Standard, and you are guaranteed that it will work great everywhere. So you target the .NET Standard. It's not a runtime, it's an agreement, it's a contract, it's an API level. Is that an adequate response?
It is a perfect response. And I want to say that one piece that probably is missing is .NET Core is an implementation of .NET specifically, well, not specifically, but optimized for cloud workloads. But remember that there are other .NET runtimes that are very interesting. Unity, which is used for gaming. It's used on PlayStation, Xbox, PlayStation Vita, every Oculus device and so on. And that also has a .NET runtime of its own.
Good point.
And what is interesting is that it uses .NET Standard. So if you build a library that accesses a web service, accesses a cloud service, or does caching or gaming or whatever, that library can be used on .NET Core on the cloud, can be used on Android, can be used on iOS, on PlayStation. So the standard is really, all the vendors, everybody that you saw in that technical steering group, Google, et cetera, we all agreed this is the API that you're going to get everywhere. And then there's multiple implementations of the runtime, which we've optimized for different workloads.
Right, and that, using that very specific example of the state machine library was just one I discovered last week. It's called Stateless, and it's a way to describe state machines rather than doing it with ifs and stuff. It's a convenience, and it's a great little library. That developer discovered the .NET Standard. Turned out that in their discovery that they could target Standard 1, and they were pleasantly surprised that now suddenly that works anywhere. So now a Unity developer has a great state machine, and a Tizen developer has a great state machine, and on and on and on. Does that answer your question? Cool. Now go forth and
Got a question?
tell everybody.
Spread the news.
Target your
Spread the
standard.
news.
We have a lot of clients using VSTS, and some of them are complaining about the speed at which you are promoting new builds. Are there any plans to freeze a client in a particular build so that they can validate their processes to support that build?
No, I want to make sure we're clear that you're talking about the speed in which we're updating VSTS or the task in your build definition.
Well, the 3-week cadence that you're on.
Right, but we update. Okay, so I think what we are giving you the ability to do is say, I am currently running this version of the build task, and I don't want this task to be upgraded because I need this to always run. But we're not going to stop upgrading the whole system of VSTS. That's going to keep running, but we do realize that people don't always want the latest build task because it's changed its behavior in such a way that it affects my build results. So that we are allowing you to do. Same thing with extensions. If you install an extension right now and I, as the producer, upgrade it, you're getting that upgrade if you want it or not. And we're allowing you to be able to say, no, I want this version of this extension and you don't change it until I say so. So you have to now opt in, or you can't opt in for that update. So from the build perspective, we're going to give you more control to make sure that your builds aren't moving as we upgrade or update VSTS. But as a whole, I don't know of any plans to be able to say, I don't want any more of those updates.
Well, I think what I heard you say is you can pin.
You can pin extensions and build tasks and
build
things like
tasks,
that.
Which is the thing that affects the side
code.
effect is your build. As
Yep.
far as the UI updating around you, that's separate. Second.
Yeah, as long as that addresses your concern, then that's correct. But we're still going to be updating everything else.
So if you turn off all of the task updates, what are you getting?
What you're getting is the consistent. So, for example, there's been upgrades that we've made to some extensions, and some vendors have made to extensions that has actually broken someone's build. And they go in there like, I don't understand why this doesn't work anymore. Or they deprecate a particular task, and that task literally just disappears from underneath them because when we upgraded our extension, we removed functionality, and now your build simply does not work anymore. And had they been able to pin that I always want version 1 of this particular extension, then their build wouldn't have been broken. And they would.
The question may have been actually the other way, which is if you do pin that, then what are the other things what things do change?
Well, if you pin the extension to the version, then nothing's going to change.
But the
no.
UI.
Oh, like for
Yes.
example, yeah. If we give you, for example, upgrade work item tracking, or we upgrade all the other features, because you got to remember it's source control, it's work item tracking, test case management, build. Visual Studio Team Service is so much more than just build, right? Release management, package management, all those are still going to be updating every 3 weeks. What we're protecting you from is the
thing that touches the
the fraction, the portion that's going to touch your build, right? That we're giving you today control over being able to say, please make sure that I always have what I need to build. But
That's always predictable.
yeah, version control is going to continue to, we're going to continue to add features to Git. We're going to continue to add features to work item tracking. So those are going to continue to move while you're still able to protect your build.
Cool. Okay. Another question?
I think you have a question here too, yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Right here.
Oh, here's the microphone. Right
Microphone's
here we go.
coming.
Thank you.
Quick question. So .NET CLI, the first question is when it's going to be GA. I believe it's still preview 2, right?
So the .NET CLI,
Yeah.
the command line interface, is part of the tooling.
Right.
So the runtime, right, one of the points that he's alluding to is that the .NET Core runtime has been released. It's in long-term support, and that is something that is in production, and people are very happy with it. Because the speed at which that was moving was different than the speed of the UI, you can make a small change to the CLI, or a small change to the runtime and validate it much quicker than you can translate something into 36 languages. So we split the tooling off, and it's in preview. We don't have a date for when that'll be, but it'll be sooner than later. But I can't give you a date.
Yeah. So second question,
Unless you
during
want it.
your demo.
No, I don't think I'm going to give a date either. I think
During
it's
your
done.
demo today, you use some kind of command line which called .NET Core, something like that?
.NET,
.NET.
is what you type. .NET is the
No.
command.
During the demo, there was .NET Core, Another command line.
Might have been net use, but that would not be related to
No,
.NET.
net something.
The only command line
We use
driver
the Azure
was
CLI.
.NET.
Yeah, I
Use
believe
the
net
.NET
core. You typed net core when you were.
Oh, I'm sorry. When I was at PWD, I was in a folder called netcore. There was a prompt that indicated the working directory was called netcore, but there is no netcore command line. That was the current
Got it.
working directory, sir.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You may have seen that in the Visual Studio Code. That was the name of the folder. No, so I'm not hiding anything. I promise.
Just a small observation, I noticed that Scott is now using Unix terminology for the directory.
I was using it because he was thinking
I'm
Unix.
just saying, I like that you've assimilated it.
I'm non-denominational. Yeah.
We have another question right here.
Yeah.
Slight change of topic. Azure Functions, serverless architecture, where it's going. You know,
Do you want me
what I'm gonna hear next year, 2 years
Yeah.
down the road.
I love them. But
You
where are
loved them,
going?
yeah, and you did. You did.
Yeah, I'm
Fantastic
actually
job.
I'm coming around to them as well.
Coming around to them. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously G8 today, right? And I think when you look at some of the capabilities that we announced with App Service as well, and sort of they're all kind of intertwined, right? And so I think while the GA was today, and we don't really have any necessarily new announcements, I think you can envision some of the things I even already talked about, right? As you look at sort of serverless, and then you start thinking about how am I going to build a microservice-based application on top of that, there's challenges that are going to come up, right? There's challenges about how they intercommunicate. There's challenges about how you do version control. And so these are things that we're very deeply looking at. And so nothing explicit yet to talk about, but those are some of the areas that I think are going to be the next wave as you build more and more solutions, right? I think a lot of the function solutions today are connecting glue, which is super powerful, and that was even the demos today were connecting glue. I think we're going to see more and more of actually entire applications be built, but that takes a lot of additional stuff to come together for it to actually be truly manageable and truly deployable, and that's I think the future roadmap for us.
I think
so
there's a whole class
super
of apps
exciting. Sorry, go on.
No, I think there's a whole class of apps here that fit perfectly well into Azure Functions, though. And the more complex code base, you can have a code base that's complex just for one function.
That's right.
What Corey's talking about is like when you have multiple services and functions that you need to orchestrate. Sometimes you don't need that at all, and Azure Functions fit that bill perfectly, and that's kind of why
That's
I
absolutely
got
right,
love them.
Beth's right on.
Yeah.
I don't mean to downgrade what's possible with function today. I think
Right.
it's actually
They're
I think
super
it's-
powerful,
I think it may
they
be
are.
one of the
But
coolest services we've got in Azure.
Would you agree, though, this is kind of philosophical, but it seems like there's two different classes of people that are heading towards the same goal. There are those that are doing, they know everything all the way down to the metal, and they SSH into machines, and they run top, and they've got microservices in a manageable, scalable, individual world, and they are effectively treating them as functions, except they want to understand, they change their own oil.
Right.
Right, but they're moving towards a promise of a self-driving car, but they will change their own oil.
I used to change my own oil.
They will, yeah.
And now I don't want to do it anymore.
Exactly. I have no idea how to change oil. The other person is doing Azure Functions, right? So while you're taking the car apart and heading towards this self-driving car, I'll just use Azure Functions until it gets that over-the-air upgrade and becomes a self-driving car. But the result is both of us put our for loops in the cloud. We have a slider bar attached to our credit card, and we say how much you want to scale. And
I mean, it
yours
scales
might
on
be
demand,
built on
though, and
containers.
you just don't even care where it is.
Exactly.
It's in the cloud.
That's right.
But one might be
That's the great thing.
Mesos and Swarm and containers and Docker, and the other one might be Azure Functions, but
Yep.
the result is the
Right.
same.
Yeah. And I mean, and just like today with applications that you write, I mean, there's the diversity I think that we're offering with Azure, I think is going to be hugely valuable because you're going to start seeing that your apps are going to come together with different pieces from different places, based on what you're trying to get done, based on the development team working on it. Again, one of the coolest parts about the microservice architecture is that you can actually have distinct development teams working on different parts and not worry as much that one's going to break the other team, right? And so suddenly you can start saying, well, this team, we acquired from another company, or this team, they all grew up loving Kubernetes, right? This team, they really fell in love with functions. They just absolutely love how easy it is to write to it and deploy to it. And this team loves to be able to change their own oil when they really need to, right? And so they're just going to deploy on VMs, and it's really hard to convince them that there's any other option, right? And suddenly you can start seeing a world, especially with VSTS on top, where you can deploy an app that consists of all those teams working together, where you can update each one individually and they don't impact the other one. And I actually think that this is going to be the future world of app development, where it's going to be a set of these services coming together, that there's not going to be any single silver bullet service. And then you're going to really need those types of services on top and solutions on top to be able to manage. I'm sorry, I'll keep
that's
going
great.
for like
Yeah,
40
and the
minutes
tools-
on
Let
this.
me just
I
kind
love
of
this
maybe
topic.
summarize.
Yeah.
You know, like containers are very young technology. Let's not forget about it. And I think that there's a lot of belief that we do believe that container will be the foundation of the execution block for a lot of cloud services in the future. So in that world, there's a lot of services and possibilities and complexities that we haven't run into, we haven't dealt with. And as people really using these building blocks to building the next generation services, we run into these new interesting challenges. So I think right now we're sitting here speculating about what the possibility will be, but as we actually get into that, building more, we'll actually truly see what the next set of challenges will be. And there's lots of possibilities.
That's right.
Would you agree, Julia, that there's been a formal recognition of Microsoft, both internally and now externally, that the reality is a hybrid, and the reality is choice, and the reason that we're betting on choice is that we're going to end up with a reality that is all of these different diverse teams doing different things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that when we talk about diverse teams, we see the world as what we call polyglot. It's not only one language, one runtime, one anything. There's no one reading that rules them all. That's not the world we live in.
Except
it's
in
really
Miguel's
about
.NET world, yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
but it's really about
It sounds like
it's really about choices,
hacks
right?
rule us all is what
Well,
it's.
so there's been times where we've gone into large companies, big companies that ought to know by now that .NET's open source. And they're meeting with us to let us know that they're moving off .NET.
Because it's not open source.
Because it's not open source and only runs on Windows. And we say, well. And then we talk about Docker, we talk about containers, we talk about VSTS,
Yeah.
and then suddenly the conversation opens back up again because they like .NET. They just want a little bit of choice and a little bit of elbow room.
Right. We had the same thing happen in VSTS as well. When TFS first came out, it was this one solution, right? You take it all, you use it all. And our customers, some of them revolted from that, right? They wanted that choice. They want to be able to use a different CI system, but the rest of our system. And I'm glad we've kind of moved to that world because it now forces us to compete head to head against the best CI system and beat them straight up. Not say, well, we're not the best CI system, but we integrate with all this other stuff, so you should probably still use us. And now it's like, no, we have to be the best Kanban board, the best agile planning, and the best. So what we're trying to do on our team is say, yes, we want you to have the choice, but we want to be the best so that you still choose us all the time.
That's right.
That's the kind of the mentality that we
That's
work
the
on.
model we have with ACS as well.
Scott Hunter on our team who owns .NET has said that as well, that it's great that we can do performance testing in the open and open source. We like Go, we like Node, but we're going to win on the level playing field,
Right.
a real open playing field.
Absolutely. Same for the VSTS
same
team.
philosophy came through in Visual Studio as well. For example, we didn't talk about C++ at all today, but in C++, one of the the thing the team is working on is allowing you to use CMake instead of MS Build, and then at the same time you get the
Right.
debugger capabilities and IDE capabilities of Visual Studio, and so those kind of mix and match kind of model you will be seeing more and more of.
Wow.
Can you tell you had a passionate point clearly with your question? Sorry. Yeah.
It's interesting, like, because the DevOps side of things, all of a sudden becomes less important. And a lot of us that provide software, in our case components, when we want to deploy things, it gets harder. It's an area of expertise we don't have. So, this started, if you remember, a few years ago with Google App Service. But they didn't really take it anywhere. So it's very encouraging to see coming back up and being discussed again. So hopefully it can go to bigger apps, like you said, full solutions.
All right, we did have one last question. We got
One last question
2
in the back.
minutes.
All right.
So it's a quick question.
Better be on VMs.
Sure. So first, thank you guys. This is great. I could listen to you. The collective brain power on that stage is amazing. I'd listen to you guys all day. So the question for Donovan, for TFS on-prem, with release management, the legacy versions had an agent, then you went to DSC, then new release manager kind of got away from moving bits around. What's the current view on moving bits with release management?
We're actually, we announced that we're going to be having ability for you to, we're kind of going back a little bit, right? We're going to give you choice again, right? Yeah, you're going to be able to install the agent directly on the target server, which allows you to deal with security issues, firewall issues. You'll be able to pull the bits to you, but we're not going to prevent you from doing what we did in the past, where you can have a proxy, where you don't want the bit, you don't want that agent on your server for whatever reason, and you're still going to be able to push the bits directly to that machine as well, which is kind of the mode that we have today. So what we're doing is going and try to give you the best of both worlds in the future.
Great. Okay. Everybody, I'd like to thank you so much for this
My
panel.
pleasure.
Thank you guys.
All right.
This was
Thank you
fun.
so much. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.